Right now at 4, we now know the name of the victim in a motel murder. The person who police say was found dead in Batavia Monday. What we know about the search for a suspect.
And we're not seeing snow out there this evening, but we are still seeing very cold and cloudy conditions. What's ahead for the rest of the work week, I'll show you coming up in just a few.
And remembering the wife and mother of a U.S. president. A look back on the life and legacy of Barbara Bush and how the world is honoring her today.
Station with the most local news. This is News 4 at 4.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us in your Top 4 at 4. Another gray day here in Western New York. The weather not necessarily matching up with the calendar, at least perhaps not in the way that we'd like it to.
No, absolutely not. We're expecting things to get a little bit worse before they actually get better. Here's a live look over downtown Buffalo. Again, cold and gray. Not exactly what we think of when we think of spring, but it could be worse.
It could be worse. Rich sent us this picture from the Boston Hills. Look at all of that snow. Also, some of the folks in the South Towns, and Kaylee's going to tell us about this in just a second, could expect more snow in the next 24 or so hours. So let's check in with meteorologist Kaylee Went, who has the latest. Hi, Kaylee.
Good evening. We are talking about more snow in the forecast, not for today, but as we move through the entire day on Thursday, we're talking about, unfortunately, some more of that heavy, wet snow we saw yesterday. At this point, it's just cloud cover out there on the satellite and radar, but pretty thick clouds. So yesterday I mentioned some breaks in that cloud cover. I don't think we're going to be seeing it, unfortunately, tonight because they are so thick. Now, temperatures are in the mid to low 30s, depending on where you are. Niagara Falls and Albion, right up along the Lake Ontario shoreline, the warmest spots, per usual, in the upper 30s. The Buffalo Metro sits at about 35 degrees, but it's the South Towns and the southern tier that remain right around that freezing point. Now, winds thankfully aren't too bad in those coolest areas, but if you move up towards, again, near the lake shores, that's where it's still pretty breezy with wind speeds in the teens. And of course, that's making it feel like the mid-20s. So like Christy and Dave mentioned, definitely not feeling like April. And when you see later on's forecast and tomorrow's forecast, you certainly won't be thinking April. First, overnight tonight, we start to see some wet snow and rain arrive first south of the city of Buffalo, right along that Pennsylvania state line. Notice that what happens throughout the early morning hours of Thursday. That snow becomes a bit more widespread and pretty moderate at times, actually. Now, as we move throughout the entire day on Thursday, we see some points where the snow sinks further south and it tapers off a bit. But I really think throughout the day we'll be seeing bursts of more moderate to heavy snow before things wind down late Thursday evening. Now, to put it into perspective for you, so many people have been asking, is this average? Well, typically in April, we see just a little over 2 inches of snow. This month, we've seen 6.2 inches, and that's at the Buffalo airport. Some spots south of the city have seen a lot more than that, so definitely above average in terms of snowfall this April. Now, coming up in my full 4 and forecast, we're going to talk about how many inches you can expect to see by the time we finish out Thursday. That's in about 15 minutes.
Kaylee, thank you. And remember, you can get the latest forecast in the palm of your hand anytime. Just download our Forewarn Weather app. It has hourly forecasts you can customize to your neighborhood and our live Forewarn Doppler radar. It is free for your phone or your tablet.
Developing this afternoon in Batavia, authorities have identified the woman who was found dead in a motel there on Monday. Earlier today, the Genesee County Sheriff's Office identified the woman as 58-year-old Sherry Colleen Butler. Deputies say she's been living in the Batavia area since around January of 2014, and lately she's been staying on a weekly basis at the Sunset Motel, where her body was found. According to Genesee County Undersheriff Gregory Walker, Butler had been stabbed in the neck, and a medical examiner in Rochester ruled her death a homicide. Investigators are now looking for help from people who knew Butler to help nail down a suspect.
Well, because she lived in a motel unit that pays week to week, that she would have been in contact with people that are probably similarly fixed, and sometimes these people don't readily communicate with the police. So we're hoping that when they realize that this woman's been murdered, that they may decide to step outside themselves and help the police for once. And so, you know, they could be a big help to us if they decide to come forward.
Deputies are also still working to find Butler's next of kin. They say they're working with police in Rochester to do that. Deputies also say this is the first homicide in Genesee County in about 2.5 years.
A Niagara Falls man who beat an East Side restaurant owner to death in 2016 will spend the next 24 years behind bars. That was the sentence handed down in a state Supreme Court room this morning. 27-year-old Jamel Chapman received just shy of the maximum sentence. Chapman pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter in the 2016 beating death of Abendra Bawa. He and his co-defendants were arrested in Ohio driving Bawa's stolen car. Chapman's sister pleaded guilty to attempted robbery. His girlfriend pleaded guilty to robbery. Chapman was on parole at the time of Bawa's death. Coming up in News 4 at 5:30, News 4's Katie Alexander is breaking down what happened in court today. Police in the town of Hamburg need your help tonight to identify the people in this video. Take a look at this. Police say they're wanted for questioning about a theft at Save-A-Lot. If you have any information, call Sergeant Timothy Crawford at 648-5118. You can also call the confidential tip line at 648-5111.
Just into our newsroom this afternoon, Banton is officially going out of business. Today, the bankruptcy court made it official by approving the liquidation of all stores. That means all 8 Western New York locations will be closing their doors by August 31st. After filing for bankruptcy back in February, the company announced that a liquidation firm had won the bid during an auction, which was held yesterday. News 4's Al Vaughters has been getting the reaction to the news, and he'll be showing us the local impact of this nationwide closing coming up on News 4 at 5 o'clock. Barbara Bush is being remembered as the enforcer, a beloved former First Lady and a mother to a president, and always devoted to her family. She died yesterday at her home at the age of 92.
She was diagnosed with Graves' disease in the 80s. She also had congestive heart failure and COPD, which affects the lungs. Kristen Holmes has the latest from Houston, Texas.
Flags around the country and world are flying at half-staff today in memory of former First Lady Barbara Bush, the matriarch of a political dynasty, one of only 2 women in American history to be both the wife and mother of a U.S. president. Tributes and condolences pouring in, none more moving than from her family. Former President George W. Bush posting this photo of his parents to Instagram, writing, "Our souls are settled because we know hers was." Her grandson tweeting, "My grandmother didn't just live life, she lived it well." Born Barbara Pierce in Queens, New York, she was 16 when she met a young man at a Connecticut country club who would change her life, George Herbert Walker Bush.
I married the first man I ever kissed. You talk about a bore. I am the world's worst.
The Bushes crossed the country to Texas and had 6 children. Their daughter Robin died of leukemia when she was just 3, a tragedy that had an enormous impact on Barbara. As her husband shifted to a life of public service, Barbara Bush remained out of the spotlight until he was elected as Ronald Reagan's vice president in 1980. And 8 years later, George H.W. Bush became the 41st president. Barbara Bush loved living in the White House. As First Lady, she established a nonprofit dedicated to literacy. In or out of politics, the legacy Barbara Bush nurtured will live on through her family, children, and grandchildren.
I know that I'm the world's luckiest woman. I think if I sort of put it in a nutshell, these are the things that are important to me: faith, family, and friends.
In Houston, Texas, I'm Kristen Holmes.
Mrs. Bush also visited Buffalo in October of 1984. She helped dedicate and launch the Metro Rail downtown. Coming up on News 4 at 5, we'll hear what she said about the Queen City. We'll also show you where she stood as the first train started down the track. We also have more reaction to the death of the former First Lady on our website. Just go to WIVB.com and look for the story about Barbara Bush.
Happening as we speak, the House of Representatives are honoring the life of Congresswoman Louise Slaughter. The memorial service is underway right now in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C. Representative Slaughter served parts of upstate New York for more than 3 decades and was the first woman in history to chair the House Committee on Rules. Slaughter died last month at the age of 88. Well, it turns out it's the IRS that needed an extension for this year's tax day. Last-minute taxpayers have until midnight tonight to file their federal income tax returns. The IRS payment website is back up and running after crashing yesterday during heavy traffic in the afternoon. The website was down for most of the day. For people filing today, no additional paperwork is needed.
Next, News 4, the best day of the week. The adorable boy who never misses garbage day and how his sanitation buddies help him celebrate.
And still ahead on News 4, canceled games at Coca-Cola Field. We'll tell you why the Bisons have had to postpone and cancel a series. That story is still coming up.